You sons of bitches. Got anything else to say? Now's the time!
I don't want none of this drama shit, so honey, you can go ahead and leave me out of this shit.
You don't want no drama.
All right, you honorable assholes, welcome to the BS Talk Experience. I'm your main host, Brian, and today with us we have a very special guest. We're honored to have Jeffrey Deskovic. Now, he is an internationally recognized wrongful conviction expert and the founder of the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice, which has freed 10 people and passed 3 laws aimed at preventing wrongful conviction. An advisory board member of the coalition It Could Happen to You, which spearheaded the passage of 4 additional laws. Jeff also serves on the Global Advisory Council of Restorative Justice International. He also co-owns the Recharge Beyond the Bar's reentry game. Jeff makes frequent television, radio, print, and new media appearances like this podcast. He speaks across the country and internationally. He regularly meets with elected officials. He has spoken in front of police cadets, prosecutorial groups, judges, and defense attorneys, addressing a wide range of wrongful conviction topics. Jeff's motivation is that he spent 16 years in prison from the age of 17 to 32 for a murder and rape prior to being exonerated by DNA. A documentary short film about his advocacy in life after exoneration called Conviction is also available on Amazon Prime. All of the links and everything else this gentleman has to offer will be down below. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
So Jeff's a very seasoned interviewee. He's been on many platforms. We're honored to have such, somebody like him on our humble podcast. But we want to dive into, let's just say, for somebody who's never heard of you before or didn't see your case on the news, let's just, I guess, run through your life story and, what your childhood is like, when and how this atrocity happened, and just I'll give you the floor, man.
Sure. So in terms of my life pre-arrest, so I grew up in Westchester County, New York, in the city of Peekskill. It was middle class. It was ethnically diverse. It was an apartment complex, and I was one of the 2 main kids. There was a lot of kids that lived in that apartment complex and in the nearby areas, and we would get together and we would play. We would do all kind of activities, and pretty much whatever I would suggest would be what we would do. If we were going to play Monopoly, if we were going to go play basketball, we were going to go swimming, we were going to go play video games, ride bikes, basketball, kickball. We invented all types of games. We played tackle football on the grass without equipment.
So all the kids stuff.
That was after school. Exactly, sure. So that was after school. But early on, I had skipped a grade. I actually skipped first grade. And so when I went to the high school, the kids there were all like 1 or 2 years older than me as a result of that. So I didn't know them at all. And so I was really quiet and tight and to myself. I didn't really fit in. I really didn't participate in organized sports. So that made me seem strange to the kids in the high school. So in 1989, one of my classmates who was in 2 of my classes as a freshman, one as a sophomore. I knew her name, she knew mine, and that was really the extent of it. We weren't even really on a high-buy basis. So she went missing, and a few days later, her body was found naked from the waist down. So that created an atmosphere of fear, rumor, and paranoia. And the whole city basically stopped. I mean, parents were dropping their kids off to school, picking them up afterwards, driving them straight home. There were repeated town hall meetings held on various updates on investigation and safety protocols. And so the police interviewed a lot of students from the high school, and some of them told the police they might want to talk to me because I didn't fit in with them. So that was how I got on the police radar. I was a sensitive teenager, and this was really my first brush with death. And so I had like an emotional reaction to it. But then again, everybody in Peekskill, most people in Peekskill had emotional reactions to it, to the point that free mental health services were offered to anybody who wanted it. But to the police, my emotion was suspicious, because why is he reacting this emotionally to the death of someone that he barely knows? So then they got a psychological profile from the NYPD, which purported to have the psychological characteristics of the actual perpetrator. And I had the misfortune of matching that profile. So for about 6 weeks, the police played this cat and mouse game with me, in which half the time they'd speak to me like I was a suspect, and the other half the time they would pretend like they needed my help to solve. When
Like
they
a
would push
good
too
cop,
hard and
bad
talk
cop.
as a suspect, they did a good cop, bad cop. And Jeff as this junior detective helper theme was developed. And because before I was a teenager, the career I wanted to have was to be a cop and to look up to him as like a father figure. So they did that for about 6 weeks, and eventually they got me to agree to take a polygraph test. They said, "Look, we've got some no information in the file, and we want to share that with you, and that's going to allow you to be more helpful to us. So help us to help you to help us." Type of logic was employed. And so the next day, rather than report to the high school, I went to the police station where I expected the test to happen. But instead, they drove me across county lines about 40 minutes away by car to the town of Brewster, which was in Putnam County. So that meant that I was not able to leave on my own. I was dependent on the cops. I didn't have an attorney present. I wasn't given anything the entire time I was there. My mother and grandmother thought I was in school, so they didn't look for me. They gave me a 4-page brochure which explained how the polygraph worked, but it had a lot of big words in it, which I didn't understand. But then I thought, well, what does it matter? I'm here to help the police, right? So
Right.
let's just get on with it. From there, they gave me countless cups of coffee and get me nervous. And then they launched into their third degree tactics. They attached the polygraph to me, and this polygraphist, who was, by the way, the polygraphist was a Putnam County Sheriff's investigator, but he was dressed like a civilian, and he was pretending not to be a cop. He never read me my rights. And he launched his third degree tactics. So he raised his voice. They attached the polygraph to me, and this polygraphist, who was, by the way, the polygraphist was a Putnam County Sheriff's investigator, but he was dressed like a civilian, and he was pretending not to be a cop. He never read me my rights. And he launched his third degree tactics. So he raised his voice at me. He kept asking me the same questions over and over again. He got in my face, invading my personal space. And he kept that up for 6.5 to 7 hours. Towards the end, he said, "What do you mean you didn't do it? You just told me through the test that you did. Really confirm it." And so that really shot my fear to the roof. And then the officer who had been pretending to be my friend, he came in the room and he told me that the other officers were going to harm me, but that he'd been holding them off but couldn't do so any longer. "Look, you got to help yourself. Just tell them what they want to hear. They'll stop what they're doing. You could go home afterwards. You're not going to be arrested." So being young, naive, frightened, 16 years old, not thinking about the long term, just being concerned my safety in the moment, I took the out, and being overwhelmed psychologically and emotionally. I took the out which he offered. I made up a story based on information which he had given me in the course of that interrogation. By the time everything was said and done, I collapsed onto the floor in a fetal position, crying uncontrollably. And obviously, I was, in fact, arrested. The DNA excluded me before the trial, but the prosecutor got the medical examiner to claim that the victim was promiscuous. He came up with that 6 months after doing the autopsy, so he invented that lie to help the prosecutor get around the DNA. And essentially, my public defender didn't defend me, and I was ultimately wrongfully convicted. I was given a 15 to life sentence. I was sent to a men's maximum security prison. I lost 7 appeals. I got turned down for parole, and ultimately, I did 16 years before DNA testing not only proved my innocence, but it also identified the actual perpetrator, who his DNA was in the data bank because he left free while I was doing time for his crime. He killed the second victim 3.5 years later after killing the victim in my case. She was a school teacher and she had 2 children.
Oh my goodness. So let's go backwards. And at this time, you're 17 years old. You're a baby for the most part. You're not even legally an adult, I don't think. And now you're facing all of this crazy situation. Life is now real. You're going to go to prison for a while and you know it. And what is going through your mind? What are you thinking? What are you feeling?
Yeah, I was extremely depressed, and I was suicidal. I thought my I thought my life was over, and I didn't know what to expect.
Sure. So now you're obviously the murder probably I'm just going to assume it actually is something that didn't have any effect, if anything, a positive one. But the sex crime now,
Right,
when
you got that right.
yeah. So now, did you go into protective custody and spend all of that time in solitary, or did you stay in general population?
I stayed in general population. So when I arrived in Elmira, they asked me, did I want protective custody? And I asked them, well, what's that? And then they said, well, for prisoners who feel like they're in danger just because of their charges, they would be kept in their cell basically like 23 hours a day. You'd come out for 1 hour a day. You wouldn't go to programs or recreation, but you'd be kept safe. And so I'm 17 years old. Remember, I was arrested when I was 16. I turned 17 by the time the trial started, which I lost and was sentenced. So I'm 17 years old. I can barely believe the fact that I'm in prison, that I've even been wrongfully convicted. That's almost unfathomable to me in and of itself. And so they asked me that, and then when they described what it was, I made this decision. Right, get a load of this line of reasoning. Imagine if you came up with this. Right, I thought to myself, you know what? I'm already, I'm going up. I'm already in prison. I can't believe this. I'm not going to make my situation worse by voluntarily agreeing to go to protective custody and stay in the cell. I can't stand being in the cell, and I'm just going to go to general population. And if somebody kills me, well, I guess I don't have to worry about doing the rest of this life sentence then. And so with that, I went to population, and I took my chances.
And so now, what was daily life, at least in the beginning, all the way to the end? Because you were there for literally 16 years. So, like the first year versus the last year, there had to have been a progression. Were you always walking around and fighting with the target on your back, or did life progressively get easier as you got eased in?
But life progressively got better as I eased in. Yeah, I mean, just real quick, just after a while, you kind of establish your reputation, right? And I had a reputation that I would fight. I would defend myself. I might get my rear end kicked most of the time, but because I'm 17, and then as I grow older, but these are all fully formed adults. So, a lot of them are guilty. I'm no criminal. I'm no street kid. So I'm getting my rear end handed to me, but I'm fighting back. I'm doing the best I can.
100%. So now now you've been in the prison system, and I watched the documentary, and so I don't want to get too far ahead of myself pretending I know something that people are hearing for the first time. But what was your support system life as far as family? You had your mom, you have your siblings, you've got family, you've got, I assume at 17 you had some friends. What was that support system like while you were incarcerated?
Yeah. If I was to sum up in a sentence, I would say that I essentially served all the time by myself. Now, if I was to get into the weeds of that a little bit, I would say that, my mother came to see me. She used to come like twice a month, make the 4.5 hour trip. But the last 5 or 6 years, I saw her once every 6 months. I mean, I think the long trip and things tightening up financially, and, medical issues like back and her feet. My brother's 3.5 years younger than I am, and he came to see me 3 times in 16 years, not at all in the last decade. Several sets of aunts and uncles that would come and visit me and then disappear for 3 years, and it did that like 3 or 4 times. So again, I mean, I essentially did most the bulk of the time, by myself. In terms of friends, I had two different friends that came to see me. Most of them, I lost almost all of my friends just the minute I got arrested. I was a hated figure in big scale, and that did want to. Their parents weren't willing to let them play with the kid that committed the murder and rape, right? So I really lost them, and so I had a couple of I had two friends that one friend came to see me once, and the other friend hung out with me for about 5 years, and I'd see him maybe like once a year, and then life took its course, and he went in the military, and that was the end of seeing him as well.
So now and I can imagine because you're going into this even as a kid and super naive in the jail, not knowing the good cop, bad cop routine. And, now you're obviously sentenced and you're going through, you said 7 appeals. So, you didn't do anything. So I'm sure you at the very least had some semblance of hope in the very beginning.
Right.
When, where, and how did that turn into a belief that you were going to die in prison and you were never going home?
Right. So, as you correctly point out, I did lose 7 appeals. So that took me through the first 11 years. So in my mind, I didn't focus on the 15 to life sentence. I just thought that I was just going to do a year or two. I just had to hang on for a year or two until the next appeal happened, which I was sure I was going to win because I was innocent. And I naively thought that the court system got better the higher up in the courts that you went. So that got me through my first 11 years, and my appeals are over. And the only way back into court when the appeals are over, by the way, is if you can find some new evidence. So I wrote letters for 4 years looking for help. Because I wasn't going to personally find any new evidence myself while in a jail, while in a prison cell. So,
Right.
and I didn't have any money to hire an attorney or investigator. So, hence the need of writing letters to try to recruit, an attorney and an investigator to hope that they could find something new. So, I wrote letters for 4 years, rarely getting responses other than the occasional no. And then I went to the parole board. And because I maintained my innocence there rather than expressing remorse and taking responsibility, I got turned down for parole. So that's when I thought I was going to die in prison at that point. I mean, I thought it was
Now, did you feel, now you mentioned the parole board, just and of course you don't know this, it's a speculation, but if you had, let's just say, confessed and said, you know what, I did it, I'm sorry, I'm not a bad person, please let me out, do you feel they would have let you out?
maybe. What can definitely be said is that I would have slightly increased my odds a little bit. That would be a fair. I think that's an objective assessment. I would have increased my chances just a.
Okay, that's fair. I'm the reason I asked that, and getting way ahead of myself, so we're not skipping around. But there's a lot of places, many different small points where the system is broken, and I know the parole board is one of those broken, points.
Correct. Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
So now you are done with your last appeal and you're 11 years in and you got a few more to do before you're ultimately released. How did that news come about that there was a break in your case with new evidence and you were now going to be exonerated?
So one of the letters I wrote, which was in care of a publishing company and writing the book author, someone at that company instead sent the letter to an investigator, Claudia Whitman, and she wrote me back right away. And when I sent her my legal paperwork showing that the DNA didn't match me, she was instantly convinced of my innocence. She had never came across a case before where somebody had a negative DNA test and yet had been convicted. So she tried to get people to take my case, and she gave me ideas. So one of her ideas was the winning one. She said, "Why don't you try the Innocence Project?" They had their organization, and she got other respected legal entities to do that. And then I also got lucky that one of the intake workers, Maggie Taylor, was not an attorney. She problem was that they were used to taking cases where something could be subjected to DNA testing, and the results would not match their client, and then they would interruption of my case because the DNA had excluded me before the trial. I mean, in a way, you might look at it like I was excluded a little bit too soon for my own good. So it was a trick to how to use the DNA to constitute something new. So Maggie representing the case 3 times is, got it pushed across. So that was how I ended up with their representation. Second and most important thing is that the DA, Jeanine Pirro, she would blocked all of my appeals, which stopped me from getting testing with her having taken office before my first appeal was decided. The new one allowed me to get to further testing, and then we got lucky that the actual perpetrator's DNA was in the data bank. So in terms of how I got the news, so my cell opens up. When the cell opens up, you're supposed to go find out why did they open it. So I stuck my head out the door, and the guard yells down, "Visit." So I walked down there and I said, "You double check on that," because it hadn't been unheard of that they'd crack open the wrong cell, and I wasn't expecting anyone to see me. And yeah, they double checked, and sure enough, so I hurried up and grabbed. So we all have a routine. We have like a visit shirt, right? So and so I'm running down, trying not to get caught in the count, because once the facility does like a count at about 11 o'clock, if you're not in the visiting room, you're not allowed to go in. You have to wait until the count is cleared. So you would lose like about 2 hours like that. So I'm running down there as I'm buttoning my shirt, and I'm thinking to myself, like, who the hell came to see me, right? So I barely make it in on time, and so this woman is waving to me. She's going like this with her hand, and I wave back, but I'm thinking somebody else, or maybe she recognizes me from, and she looks at me like I'm nuts, and she says, "Well, the woman you're waving to, you don't you know her?" So that she was my attorney, and so she says, "You're going home tomorrow." And I said, "No, I'm not." And she repeated it, and I repeated my response, and we did that 3 times. And then I had this 3.5 hour of mental paralysis where I sat there, and she literally held my hand, and my head was spinning, and all these different crazy thoughts were coming through my head, and I was articulating them. And one thought had nothing to do with the other. And every now and then she'd break in, and she'd say, "Are you ready to talk about tomorrow?" And I'm like, "No, no, 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 just look, get that away from me. We're not talking about that. That's not happening tomorrow. No, I'm not entertained." Because I couldn't deal with, I was afraid to hope anymore at that point. That hurts, man. To be turned down, you have an appeal. That's like being wrongfully convicted all over again. So eventually what made it real was she said, "Look, the time for the visit's almost over. There's a ton of stuff to do between now and tomorrow as far as the media. And I gotta get your shoe size. I gotta get, we gotta get you a suit." And so that made it real. And of course, about 5 minutes later, this new fear popped into my head. And so I'm thinking that something's going to happen between today and tomorrow, and the DA is going to change their mind, and they're going to do what they always do, right? Which is fight me and win. So that was how I got the news.
Okay, awesome. And then obviously the rest is history to a small point. But
Yes.
let's talk about, because I deal with a lot of people that have spent a lot of time in prison. Um, when you got out, now clearly the difference between somebody who is being released, they're going on parole, you're being set as a free man. But was it like an instantaneous, you just got out and you're free, or what was that process like?
Yeah, sure. So I have a little. I'll try to be concise. I have a little story with a little cover to it,
Sure.
color to it. So yeah, yeah. So firstly, the night before, so I go to recreation, and I'm making the rounds, telling people, "Hey, I'm going home tomorrow." People that I know, and I'm on the phone with, the Innocence Project had left this law student there to speak with me on the phone. It's crazy because I'm talking about going home and various concerns, but like everything I can see, my senses are just telling me prison, prison, prison. Because I'm looking at the prison wall and the barbed wire and the guards and the prisoners and the uniforms and the whole bit. So it was kind of like crazy talking to this person I don't even know. I've never spoken to before, right? So I stayed up all that night. I couldn't go to sleep. So there was a prisoner in the cell next to me. I knew him from the last prison I was in, and so he stayed up all night with me. He's in his cell, I'm in mine, and we're taking turns holding a mirror out so that we can have like a visual to that, right? And he talked the guard into allowing me to get a shower early in the morning before they had actually got the news that I was going to court. So I got the shower, and I thought about this. I lived another man's dream. Okay. When I first went upstate, I remember hearing people say, "Man, if I win my appeal, it's going to be like somebody in here hit the lottery also. I'm going to pick somebody that don't have anything, that's just starting out, that's got no context on the outside. I'm going to leave them everything." So I'd quickly put my stuff in bags that the little bit I was going to take with me, and everything else I loaded up, right? I decided to live that man's dreams out. So my cell opens up, and I run down the cell block. It's the equivalent of like half the block. I run down there, and I had this big old knapsack on my shoulder, and Santa Claus had nothing on me that day, right? So I'm running down there, and I drop the bag off, and He's like, oh, thank you. Oh my God. Oh my. Never mind that. Just get the stuff in your cell. Hurry up, okay, before the guards see it, because you're not allowed to. One prisoner's not allowed to give another prisoner anything. So then I run back and forth. I drop him 2 bags, and now I'm a sweaty mess, right? And the guards yell up at me, you know, Deskovic, what the hell are you doing? Get your down here now. I'm coming, I'm sorry. Right? So I go back yet another half a block to get my stuff. And I bring it downstairs, and then we're pushing the thing, and I'm waving the people. I'm going to the mess hall and waving the people on the other side of the mess hall, you know, telling people, yeah, I'm going home and everything. So then I go to the pack up room where the guards being lazy said, look, we're not taking all of that, even a little bit I have, right? They're like, I'm not taking, you're not, where are you sending this? So by that point, the only address I remembered was the Innocence Project. I didn't even know the home address to send it. So, you know, I send it, I send the thing there, and then, and you know, they take pictures and give me a temporary ID, and we're about to go to court. And so they come up to me and, you know, try to put these handcuffs and shackles on it. So I said, well, what are you doing, man? Well, what's that? I mean, I'm going to court to go home. I mean, you just took the ID. You just took my picture to give me the temporary ID. You know I'm going home. I mean, what do you think? I'm going to escape on my way to the court where they're going to let me out legally? This doesn't make any sense. And then they told me the last thing that I wanted to hear. They said, look, well, for all we know, the judge could change his mind and decide not to let you go. So we can't take the chance.
Oh no.
So they put all the stuff on me, and this other guard. Yeah, that's a terrible thing to say to me, right? But this other guard said, look, don't worry about it, Mr. Deskovic. This is the last time you're going to be in the chains, you know, in your life. So they put the stuff on me. I get in the vehicle. They're driving me to court. I'm leaving from Sing Sing. You know, it's a town called Ossining in Westchester. And I've been to Ossining before prior to being arrested. So I know what the surroundings are. So I'm in the car, and as I'm driving, they're driving, I'm looking out, and, you know, I'm seeing people walk on the sidewalk and other vehicles going in the opposite direction, the same direction. I'm just kind of marveling how just a few feet of steel separate my reality from theirs, and they're totally obvious to, you know, my situation. You know, eventually we get to the court, and, you know, they're waiting. And I had been told on the visit with my lawyer that that Barry Scheck, one of the co-founders of the Innocence Project, he's going to come back there and speak to me and reassure me that everything's okay, and they're going to give me a suit. And like hours and hours are passing, and there's no there's signs of neither Scheck nor suit. So I'm starting to worry. So the guard tried to give me this brown bag lunch, right? Which is, they have this terrible bologna sandwich that's been made the night before, so it's sweated into the bread. It's a bag of chips with mostly air. It's an apple. It was the most terrible thing you ever want to eat. The guard, you got to hand it to me. I look, I'm not going to eat this, man. I'm going home, and look, I got to give it to you. That's my job. What you do with it after that is on you. So I take the bag, and, you know, more time passes by, and I have no idea what's going on. And then I think to myself, well, maybe something's wrong here. I better eat this, because by the time I lose this proceeding and go back to prison, it's going to be after lunch, and it's going to be hours till dinner. And I'm not under no illusions. I know damn well they're not making anything for lunch for me late. So I eat the damn thing. I eat it, and then it's finally the suit shows up, and I put it on, and you know, we're walking in the back hallways, and of course, observing tight security. The sergeant who's escorting us makes me stand on the far side of the hallway as I'm walking, so not closer to the doors, so that when I'm walking, I don't dive into, you know, jump through the courthouse and run. I'm gonna again, I'm a risk to escape, even though I'm going to court to be let out, right? Just to show you the lunacy is the point. I still have my handcuffs on, right? They have the handcuffs on, and they said, look, your family's on one side of the room, all the media's on the other. So people are waving to me, but I'm not thinking about them. I mean, like you guys have like not supported me. You know, some of you never came to see me at all, ever, period, end of story. I'm focused on the media who crucified me when I was going to trial. So I'm looking, is there anybody that I can see now? My chest is kind of puffed out a little bit, like, yeah, see, I told you, you know. So I walk in there, and Scheck says, look, I spoke to the judge earlier in his chambers, and you're definitely going home tomorrow. Do you want to say anything to the court, or do you want to wait for the press conferences? And I hadn't made up my mind. I hadn't even thought about that. And suddenly this judge comes out. Now, normally it's supposed to go in front of the judge who presided over the trial because of their familiarity with the case before. And this judge was still on the bench, but I think he ducked the assignment, and the judge with the least amount of seniority got stuck with this. And so like he rushed in, and you could tell from the look on his face, like he didn't want to have anything to do with this. He was being forced into it. So he rushes in, and here's my lawyer speak, and here's the prosecutor speak, and all right, well, conviction overturned. And he rushes out without ever getting a chance and to say anything. So I got up to leave, and then the enormity of the moment kind of hit me. A ton of bricks. So I sat back down, and my lawyers are speaking to me, and like I'm hearing them and not hearing. My hearing is going back and forth. And I sat there for about like maybe 20 minutes, half hour. The bailiffs cleared the courtroom out because I think they saw I was going through some type of crisis, but that's the only thing they were really equipped to do, which was within their level of expertise. So they made the only move they could, right? Clear the court.
Sure.
So in about 20 minutes, I got up, and each step towards the door that I took, that nobody stopped me. Uh, it got more real and real. There was a tall guard, I remember, and she was trying to, she was a bailiff, not a guard, and she was trying to be professional, and I could see the water was running despite her trying to be stoic. And I looked up and said, "Thank you," and she said, "Good luck." And I remember I went outside, and it was a blue sky, and there was a ton of people clapping, and you know, because you overcame this system, you survived. And I went to the press conference there, and my first words actually, when it was my turn to speak, I said, "Is this really happening?" I thought I finally did it, man. Brian, I finally did it. I finally managed to lose my mind and go nuts, okay? And I'm going to wake back up, and I'm going to see the cell bars and the walls of all the other cues. But you know, the beautiful thing is, it never happened, man. It never happened. I actually was free. And I said everything
Absolutely.
I ever wanted to say in like a 2.5 hour off the cuff presentation. I thought I was finishing, and another thought came to my mind.
Oh, I saw the interview. The stuff on the news is public, and I watched a lot of it ahead of time, and it's I mean, yeah, it's definitely an emotional thing for everybody watching it. So, just a random question, because you mentioned Judge Jeanine, who now has a freaking TV show as a celebrity judge. Have you guys ever crossed paths or discussed anything afterwards?
We have not. Not only does she have the judge shows, as you correctly point out, but I also want to mention she does a lot of commentary, and in her commentary on Fox. If you knew nothing of her, you would believe that she's this bastion of due process, and yet it was anything but that when she was actually the district attorney. I mean, I'm not the only wrongful conviction case she had her hands on. There were two other people in Westchester
Sure.
County, that Selwyn Days and Keon Katibi that were wrongfully convicted on her watch. So anyway, the short answer is no. I remember, like within the first 6 months of my being out, I remember I had an offer to appear on the Geraldo Rivera show, and I wanted to do it. And then they got back and said, well, look, Jeanine Pirro sometimes appears on this show, and there's a possibility that she might appear on this episode. Would that cause any kind of problem with Jeff? And so word was sent back to them that no, it would not cause any conflict. But they were supposed to get back to us and let us know what the date and time was, and we never heard back from them. They never answered us after that. So I believe that they ran it by her as well, and she put the kibosh on it. And I've never
Yeah.
seen her since. Whenever she's been asked about my case, her go-to line is, "I wasn't the district attorney when he was convicted, and no new evidence was presented to me, when I was DA." But while those things are true, it's also disingenuous because, first of all, you might not have been the DA when I was convicted, but you did take office before my first appeal was decided. It was your office that fought 7 appeals, even though the DNA didn't match me. It was your office, who twice denied me DNA testing. It was your office that got me thrown out of court when my lawyer was given inaccurate information pertaining to filing procedure, which resulted in my petition being arriving 4 days late. So your office did all of that, okay? And your successor, who allowed me to have the testing, was not presented with new evidence. They were presented with the facts of the record, and we were asking for testing, and that was enough for her to allow me to have the testing. So You mean to tell me in all of that you don't bear any moral responsibility in any of that?
No, definitely. And that's why I asked that question because it was, she's definitely a prominent figure now. And I've seen where she's been asked about your case. And you're right. She gives such a generic, disingenuous, emotionless, I should say, even just response as almost as if it's like dismissive, like yeah, that's yeah, whatever. Let's not talk about that,
Right,
which,
exactly.
which is insane. Now, so now you're out, you're free, and obviously it's been it's been over a decade since then. But now in the midst of your out, life is beginning normal and you spent literally 16 years. Was there what kind of, I should say, from a technology standpoint, 16 years of crazy technological advances to just having that convict mentality of being able to, just the freedom to go out and do stuff. How was your transition back into society?
Yeah, I would say it was really difficult on a number of levels. So, firstly, when you're released via exoneration, you're released with nothing. New York State does have compensation, and so you can sue in state court and seek that and file a federal civil rights lawsuit, which I did. But the key point is that there are no reentry services. I mean, that's a legal process. It took me 5 years before I was compensated. So I lacked stability of housing. So I bounced around from place to place. Nearly ended up into a homeless shelter at one point. Thank God for Mercy College, which gave me a scholarship to finish the bachelor's degree. And then they allowed me to live on campus, which is how I avoided the shelter. And they gave me the meal plan. Um, the technology was much different. So with internet and cell phone was new. So I remember my lawyer handed me the cell phone to speak to a reporter when I was at a luncheon following a press conference. And he said, "Look, there's a reporter that wants to do a story. They'd like to speak to you. They couldn't make the press conference. Could you speak to him?" So he handed me the phone. And I said, "Yeah, but where are the holes in the phone in order to speak into?" Yeah, so GPS, different methods of banking. The world was different culturally. Then cities and towns looked just familiar enough that I could recognize some things, but yet other things were much different. Different people lived in the neighborhoods than what I was used to. So the sum total of it all, it made me feel like if I was like a fish out of water. I was always passed over for gainful employment. I mean, they seemed like they wanted somebody who could hit the ground running rather than being patient for a little bit of on the job training. It was psychological after effects. I mean, it's common when people have been exonerated that they have post-traumatic stress disorder, panic attacks, anxiety, feeling of having been frozen in time, feeling of processing things at a slower speed, fear on seeing law enforcement. So I had to deal with those psychological after effects. I mean, I freely say, look, for about 6 years, I used to go to therapy like 4 times a week, in order to deal with the after effects and also to adjust to the new life. There was stigma. You were in prison for 16 years wrongfully. Yes. I mean, you were there for 16 years. So how much of that rubbed off on you? Is it safe to be alone someplace with you? So when it comes to when it came to personal relationships, yes, that did and still does, pose obstacle. It's been difficult in terms. I think the hardest part of all of that was just being lonely. I felt like I was still in prison. The only difference is I have no physical bars. I have freedom of movement, but I'm still like an observer. I'm not a participant. I still want to like throw a ball around and let's go on the bumper cars and let's find some wild party someplace and what's nightlife. But who are my peers to do that with?
Right.
So other people my age, they've past that stage of life. That's behind them. They're probably married or in some serious relationship. So the people that are younger that are into that, I'm not their peer. I mean, I look like I could be their parent, right? And then on
Right.
my end, and then my end of it, yeah, I might want to do youthful things, but I'm also well aware of what consequences could be, and they're not. So in another way, I'm much more mature than them. So that really proved to
You
be
missed your childhood, man. I get it.
yeah, exactly.
So now you mentioned that, and let's say like as you mentioned, personal relationships, whether it's just friendships, dating, employment, all these other things, family.
Right.
The town itself, because you mentioned, I mean, they basically crucified you
Yes.
when you got out. Not that they would anyone would owe you an apology or feel it that they would, but did you at least feel that negative stigma following you was over, or did you feel like you were constantly being judged?
No, I feel like it was over. So, my case was the subject of a lot of television and print media
Yes,
and,
it was.
radio, every kind of media. Okay. So when I would walk around on the sidewalks of Peekskill, so people used to honk horns and wave at me and come up to me and shake my hand and everything. And, it was like a welcome home. Man, it was the best, it was one of the best feelings in the world, but in time that kind of way wears off, but I got a kick out of it. And I liked feeling the warmth and the empathy, particularly since I perceived the world really to be just so cold and uncaring while I was in prison writing letters trying to get help, rarely getting answers. And I remember there was even people that I used to say, yeah, I had another Jeff Deskovic sighting
Right.
yesterday.
Yeah. I
So
actually remember seeing you on the news. I mean, I'm only 40, but I do remember that news story. I remember that when I remember that when it was on the news and live.
yeah,
So,
absolutely. So no, so I did get a welcome. I did get a nice welcome home. And people are very empathetic. And look, the media is in a totally different position.
of course
And
they are.
so yeah, and so I'm able to get news coverage. Maybe I use that as a tool in the advocacy work that I do. And so I can get news coverage maybe 30 to 35% of the time that I would like to have it. So I've
Sure.
learned how to, you can just keep coming up with new things or something else that makes something newsworthy. You can keep it going, rather than what's typically the case for exonerees. You get your initial hit of 5 minutes of fame, and then after that, just disappear. But I
Sure.
figured out how to keep it going. And look, I do more media now, connection with the foundation, and the work with the group, a coalition group. It could happen to you. And being a lawyer, I get more media coverage now on a consistent basis. And the advent of new media, which is amplify, giving people many more ways of exercising their freedom of speech. I do more stuff now than I did even back then. And what I like about it is that centered around it's centered around my advocacy. It's the case just gets the after mention as the backstory, but that sinks into, look, I'm an advocate. I have a body of work, and I'm exoneree, but that's what motivates me. That's my backstory. I'm not just an exoneree, and I hold myself to the same standards as other professionals in the field do.
Oh, absolutely. Now, there's two things that I'd like to cover going back that you mentioned, and I saw in the story. Some stuff is public, but one of the things we don't really talk about is money. And I'll just leave the amounts alone. I'm gonna let you talk about this, but there's one part about your settlement that I didn't understand, nor did I feel that it was fair or even comprehensible. Is
Mm,
that the court awarded you one amount, a
mm,
sizably larger amount,
mm,
and because of your legal situation, literally
mm,
just because you were a kid and didn't know how to handle yourself, they basically cut that down to a fourth. So they took literally a fourth of your the amount of money that you were awarded, and I think you should have gotten more.
right.
But then they say, well, oh, well, because you were a kid and didn't know any better at 17 and you were an idiot back then, we're not going to pay you that much. We're only to pay you this much. Why
Yeah.
is that?
So yeah. I'll explain that. Yeah. So there was a there was an agreement that I mean, my the four defendants in the federal lawsuit. I mean, I didn't let anyone get away. Okay. But so it was a big. So there was so there was the city of Peekskill. So those Westchester County was their medical examiner who committed fraud. So they settled with me. Legal Aid Society of Westchester, because it was their attorney who rendered legally deficient representation. They settled with me. The city of Peekskill, because their officers coerced the false confession out of me, and also falsely attributed a statement to me and purposely didn't document witness interviews. So they settled.
Right.
So the last one was this polygraphist, and I kind of considered him to be the worst of the lot, because till he stepped in, none of the other stuff could have happened. So I went to trial with them, but I had an agreement in place. It was like called like a high-low agreement. So what that meant is Putnam County was worried that I was going to bankrupt them, and so they wanted an assurance that they wouldn't have to pay out a certain amount. And I gave them that ceiling in exchange for a floor. So I said, okay, well, for that, uh, you have, no matter what happens, right? You could win the actual case, and you still have to pay that a floor. And so so that was the agreement. The jury didn't know that, and they came back with like a $41,161,000 jury award. But looking back in hindsight, other than the first 2 weeks after that, okay, where I kind of felt like an idiot. I'm not gonna lie, I did kind of think I was an idiot. They wanted to give me all that money, and I managed to find a way to not let it get to me. And it would have been fun to have that kind of money, not gonna lie. But in reality, look, I don't regret it, because no, I wouldn't have gotten that amount. They would have cut it down dramatically, and then they would have appealed and cut it down more. And so yeah, I mean that's kind of. But the thing that bothers me a little bit is just the media reports. They keep saying that you got 41 million. Look, I wish I got the 41 million. Okay, I wish I did. Okay, I had the high-low agreement in place, and so that's what actually was paid out. And but again, you don't keep, even as to the money that I got through the settlements and ultimately through winning that trial. You don't, that's not what you keep, that's what's paid out. You
Right.
have to pay the legal expenses, and then the lawyers take a third. So in reality, you keep 55 to 60% of what's you're awarded as a litigant.
Sure, and I'm glad you clarified that, because it was a big amount, and I didn't want to say anything about the
Right.
amount if you didn't want to, but
Mhm.
so my thing wasn't, you're right. I mean, the lady who, spilled hot coffee on herself got a crazy, 8-figure settlement. I mean, it's just crazy how that stuff works. But I also look at it like they took not only 16 years of your life, but 16 of those formidable years
Right.
where you could have been working, gainfully employed and doing that. So
Mhm.
they have to give you enough money to set you up to where you can essentially go into life financially secure with
Yeah.
the security that you should have had. Now that going, into the next step is of, so you're a lawyer, I
Mhm.
saw you on stage and I saw you take that walk. I mean, that's just
Yeah.
incredible.
Mhm.
So, and I'm just curious, this is just my own curiosity. While you were going to law school, being as you through, let's say, your high school years and your college years, I know for myself, I have a 3-year-old daughter. She's only 3, but I look at, and I have nieces and nephews in that high school phase. Now at 40, post college, I have trouble looking at their high school homework and helping them. How was it that you could, I mean, obviously you're a brilliant man, you're very intelligent, but was it extra difficult for you going into college without that background?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it definitely was. And uh, I want to say it was even more difficult when I went into law school. So in law school, it's graded on a curve, okay, which means that in the grading process, so the professors first they figure out how, it's all subjective. They figure out how many points. The question one's worth 20 points. They subjectively figure out, did you get 15 points? Is it a 12-point answer? So they do all that, right? Raw. And then they go back after they graded all the papers, and then they figure, well, this was the best answer, so this 84 really is like a 92. But so you could be helped by the curve, but you could also be hurt by the curve. Your 84 might drop down to a 73, something like that.
Sure.
So I mean, you literally are competing. I was literally competing with people, half my age. Some of them went to really, really like Ivy League schools, and I went to college partially in prison, and then and then on the outside. I mean, I'm always grateful for the education I got from Mercy College, but that also is not a Ivy League top 10 school, and I don't know that I could have done Ivy League top 10 school work either. So I definitely was at kind of a disadvantage there. But then you know, you might say I was working full time because I was doing all this advocacy work. I was organizing all kind of, panel discussions and speaking events on campus. I wrote some for the school paper. I was doing tons of media interviews. I was still meeting with electeds. I was using my winter break to go to other countries to work with advocates on the ground over there. And sometimes the public relations personnel at Elizabeth Hobbs School of Law at Pace University, they would set up a room so that in between classes, I duck in some room and would do a media interview, or I might zoom into one school or another, some other state, and pop back out and go back to the rest of my classes. So I was doing all of that and making trips to our state's capital. So I really was working like a full-time job, and but I was never comfortable. I loved the camaraderie. I hated being chained to the classroom, and I felt like that definitely was not where the real advocacy work was happening at. But look, sometimes the path to heaven, man, it runs through hell, right? So
Love it. Path
so
to
I had to
path
do
to
it.
heaven runs through hell. I'm going to use that one. I like that.
So I did it all, and look, I was always pulling out my hair, and I was always afraid I was going to fail everything. And look, I would get backed up. Sometimes I would learn a semester's worth of material for 4 or 5 classes in the last 6 to 7 weeks, because I'd be so backed up from running around doing all this other stuff that I had no choice but to start putting in 10, 14-hour days. But I got it done, man. Whatever it took, man. And I just always reminded myself why I was there, why I was doing all this for, to help other people that are similarly situated. And I just wouldn't take no for an answer, man. I just wouldn't give up, and I kept fighting, and I managed to pass everything, and I even making the dean's list several times.
That's impressive. And now, Jeff, I mean, I respect your time. I really do. I really enjoy talking to you. And I know I could talk to you for days. If I was local with you, I'd actually like to go out and meet you in person.
Yeah,
Hopefully
for
that'll
sure.
happen. But
Yeah,
for this podcast, let's call it that,
yeah.
for respect of your time, you're doing a lot of different things. And why don't you go ahead and tell the audience what you're up to now, and how they'll be able to support any of your projects.
Yeah, sure. So with my nonprofit, the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice, so we have 10 cases that we're actively working on. I've entered some of those cases as co-counsel, as an advisory board member of the coalition group, if it happened to you, which the foundation is part of. So we're trying to repass. We had passed the law, Commission on Prosecutor Conduct, which seeks to hold prosecutors accountable. So we had passed the law back in 2018 and passed a tweak of it. The district attorneys not wanting oversight, they challenged the law in court. They argued it was unconstitutional. The judge ruled against them, all their arguments, but did find a problem in the appeal process. So we're trying to repass that law now to bring accountability to prosecutors. The foundation did help to pass a law pertaining to videotaping interrogations, but the law came out watered down. They made exceptions for sex offenses, drug cases, and various murder cases. So we're trying to get rid of those exceptions in New York. We have a chapter in Pennsylvania, and we're working on, again, passing that Commission on Prosecutor Conduct in PA, and also Pennsylvania is one of 15 states that does not have compensation. So we're trying to do that. We have a chapter in California, and we're working on, again, the accountability for the prosecutors, and we think there's a chance to get rid of the death penalty in California. So myself, the coalition founder, Bill Bastick, and one other person, we're the only 3 people that are in common to all 3 of those chapters. So we have those policy initiatives that we're doing. I am trying to raise funds for the organization. So we got started because I gave us a 7-figure donation to get started. But after about 3 years, I couldn't keep writing large checks. So I had to get rid of the paid employees and convert it to a volunteer organization. And so we have about 20 volunteers. 3 of them are on the legal side. And when we approve cases that we believe the innocence claim and we see a way to win, we pitch the cases to lawyers in contemplation of their taking on the case pro bono and carrying out our strategies. And that's a better way of doing it rather than doing nothing, right? But at the end of the day, I still, again, want to have a staff. And so we're trying to raise funds to, again, have in-house staff. I know what worked well for us before. I know what needs to be done better, which didn't work so good. So trying to fundraise for that, to have those legislative goals, looking to free some people In terms of conviction, the documentary, as you mentioned, is about my advocacy work and my life afterwards. So we've been selected by 11 film festivals. It's won 3 awards, awarded distinction, best documentary, best cinematography. So we're waiting for the results for some other documentaries festivals that we've entered. I expect we're going to get into at least 2 more. And then there's a larger feature, which could be about an hour and a half. So I'm looking forward to that. Some point down the line, I really do hope that I could find like a book deal and a movie deal and get my story out there through as many different forms of art as I can. I want to increase my profile because I'm a tool for the cause. So the larger my profile is, the better. Um, I do I do make a lot of appearances in front of, as you mentioned, groups of police, prosecutors, judges, defense lawyers, and the message is, look, this is about accuracy and justice, and so in that aspect, we're not natural opponents. It's just when people do misconduct or do things that are not right, then we're opponents, but not before that. So those things, I have this dream. Maybe I'm a dreamer, but I'm at what if 25,000 people, would be willing to part with $3 or $5 on a recurring monthly basis. We have the crowdfunding page on Patreon for that. And if people did that, if you sacrificed a cup of coffee or going out just one time a month, we would have a budget. We'd be able to, hire lawyers, paralegals, investigators, executive directors, someone to raise money, all the essential personnel to really do this the right way. And if we can get the results that we've gotten on a shoestring budget, imagine what we could do if we were really armed for bear. So, I'm always pushing that page. People want to reach out to me, they can reach me through the website. It's deskovic.org, Deskovic. I do have a public figure page on Facebook because I'm nearly at my friend total on the personal page. Whatever I put on one
Yeah, I
page,
sent you a request.
I know I approved also just shortly before the interview. But I have the public figure page too. People can, and I have the Instagram and LinkedIn, so people can keep up with, what the foundation's doing, what I'm doing, media interviews, and stuff like that. So I'm definitely reachable. But look, just trying to do my part in everything. I do find it all to be healing and cathartic, and I do feel like this is my purpose in the world. That's how I make sense of everything. And I take that energy that I would feel and I channel it into the advocacy work, and that's what allows me to not be angry or bitter.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things that all of the links for everything are going to be down below in the description and the episode notes for both the podcast and the YouTube video that I'll be releasing. But one thing I do got to mention, because my wife and I were part of this, and I mentioned these before we started recording. So there's this program called Amazon Smile. I believe I'm saying that correctly, or Smile
Yes, you are.
Amazon.
Yes,
So basically, the links will be in there. But my wife and I have Amazon Prime.
you.
We shop anyway. It costs you nothing. As a consumer, it does literally nothing. It has no effect on you, but it gives this man some money to make some of these dreams that are for a very good cause happen. So those links will be down below. But definitely, if you want to contribute to his Patreon, definitely subscribe, give him some money. Please do that. But if anything, if you are just going to buy something on Amazon and you're going to do it anyway, it's money you're already going to spend, do it through the Amazon Smile, would you please? I think
Thank
that's
you.
a
I
very
really
important
appreciate
plug.
that. Absolutely, very important plug. And just to share with everybody, look, none of the money, okay, through any type of rationale is going to find its way into my pocket, right? 100% of the money is going to go to, you know, getting the advocacy work done as far as the policy changes, and hiring the legal personnel to get people out. I'm fine financially. Whatever I got from compensation, I get a check every month, so that serves in lieu of a salary for me, which allows me to spend my 50 to 60 hours a week doing this type of work. So it's not going to come to me; it's going to go specifically to the cause. So yeah, if you'd like to be involved in you know freeing people wrongfully imprisoned and preventing this from happening, I mean, it definitely is a way that you could join.
I guess my very last question on our way out here is if there is somebody fighting a case or they're being arrested or incarcerated on something that would be something that you could help them with, how does somebody reach out to actually get help from your organization?
Yeah, so they could, again, they could go to the website, deskovic.org. There's a mechanism there where they can email me. We're set up to do post-conviction work, not work on the front end. If someone's been charged with something that they haven't done, for sure, you want to go to the law library, you want to learn the law, you want to stay on top of your lawyer. How is your lawyer planning to defend you? What's the strategy? Make sure they interview everyone they're supposed to interview. Make sure the lawyer fights back in the media. Don't let the narrative just come from the police and the prosecutor. So, if you are wrongfully imprisoned, I mean, I would encourage you to go to the law library. I mean, I did that, and I used to read about other cases where people would be exonerated. I use that as motivation and on what route they took. So, taking those steps, you know, um, we're able to take cases in New York. If it's a DNA case, we can do that beyond New York. We don't do just DNA, but it is expensive to run a non-DNA investigation at a state. So that's our limitation there. But you can still reach out to me, even if your case is beyond our geographical limit. Look, I've written hundreds of those letters and I've read hundreds of those letters, and I know what they're supposed to look like. And I have like the consolation prize, I guess, is so when I'm a softie, okay? So when people contact me for help, I try not to send anybody away with nothing. So, at a minimum, I can explain to the advocate or the person himself, look, this is what the letter is supposed to look like. This is the format to use. And when you do it all, send me the thing. I'll read it. I'll make pretend I'm receiving the letter, and I'll work with you to get the letter as best you can. And I'll tell you how to go about trying to find other legal help, even if we can't help you directly. And, I'm proud to say that has resulted in some people getting legal representation. And if you've got representation, you've got a shot at that point. So the other tip I give people is this: if you find some new evidence, you know, um, don't waste that. Okay, please don't file anything on your own. Okay, that's denied before you even the ink is even dry on the paper. Okay, courts do not respect pro se litigation. I've had conversations with court personnel, and they look, we're under a big caseload, and this thing comes in, and it just seems to be this scattershot approach, and we just try to deny it the thing as quickly as we can on the narrowest of ground. So don't waste your issues. There have been cases that people have come to the foundation that we could have won them, but the court they made it a procedural mess. The court will not allow us to re-argue something that's already been argued before. We can't say, yeah, but you know, um, Brian Fitz was not a lawyer when he argued this point. He really didn't argue it the right way. We
Right.
got this.
There's no do-overs.
There's no do-overs. So don't waste it. You're better off to sit on that and try to find legal representation. And if you structure the letter in a certain way where you can demonstrate to people that you're innocent and you show them a potential route to victory, your odds of getting some help have shot up some, and particularly if you have something that hasn't been used already. So that would be my general advice to people. Focusing on what's important and just trying to overturn the conviction, regain your freedom, not the prison politics. You know, um, so those that would be my advice. Gear your time to some kind of potential benefit for you on the outside. I mean, that's what I did, and it worked out for me.
Well,
And never quit, man. And when you're about to quit, just tell yourself, see, that's your key moment. Okay, if you would have just kept going and not quit in that moment, might that have been where you broke through? Because I've told myself that while I was there, and even while in law school and other things I'm doing, I've told myself that, and I keep going, and it's worked for me, so it can work for other people.
that is awesome advice. And so, guys, thank you guys so much for watching. Jeff, you are awesome. You have a heart of gold. I really hope that we can continue chatting offline
Absolutely.
and online again.
Yes.
And I travel a lot. So next time I'm up in your neck of the woods, or if you ever feel like getting out of that cold of New York and coming to sunny Arizona, I got a place to stay for you.
I
So
definitely would like to. I know a couple of people in Arizona. And look, even if you're not in New York, if you're nearby, Connecticut, PA, Jersey, wherever, I mean, Rhode Island, wherever it might be, let me know. But yeah, so you come this way, I'll come that way. We'll make it happen for sure.
definitely,
Okay?
for sure. And thank you guys so much for watching. If you are watching this, like, share, subscribe to everything on me, everything on Jeff, links and everything. All the information you need is in the description down below. And we'll catch you next Wednesday.